in determining whether you succeed, there's more to it than intellect and energy, and I'd like to talk for just a second about that.
In this video, we will look at some life-changing advice given by Warren Buffett and how you can apply them to your life. Firstly, I want you to know that you have all it takes to make it in life. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Warren Buffett emphasized this over and over again.
I would like to talk for just 1 minute to the students about your future when you leave here, because you're going to learn a tremendous amount about investments, and you'll learn enough to do well. You've all got the IQ to do well. You've all got the initiative and energy to do well, or you wouldn't be here. And most of you will succeed in meeting your aspirations. But in determining whether you succeed, there's more to it than intellect and energy, and I'd like to talk for just a second about that.
First advice, sit down for a minute and make a list of people you admire. What are the qualities they possess that make you admire them? Warren Buffett explains this advice in his usual humorous manner.
Play along with me in a little game for just a second, in terms of thinking about that question. You've all been here, I guess almost all of your second-year MBAs, and you've gotten to know your classmates. And think for a moment that I granted you the right to buy 10% of one of your classmates for the rest of his or her lifetime. Now you can't pick one with a rich father; that doesn't count. I mean, you've got to pick somebody who's going to do it on their own merit. And I gave you an hour to think about it. Which one are you going to pick among all your classmates as for the one you want to own 10% of for the rest of their lifetime? And are you going to give them an IQ test? Pick the one with the highest IQ? I doubt it. Are you going to pick the one with the best grades? I doubt it. You're not even going to pick the most energetic one necessarily, or the one that displays the most initiative. But you're going to start looking for qualitative factors in addition to, because everybody's got enough brain here and enough energy. And I would say that if you thought about it for an hour and decided who you're going to place that bet on, you'd probably pick the one who you responded the best to, because the one that was going to have the leadership qualities, the one that was going to be able to get other people to carry out their interests. And that would be the person who was generous and honest and who gave credit to other people even for their own ideas, all kinds of qualities like that. And you could write down those qualities that you admire in this other person, whoever you admire most in the class. And then I would throw in a hooker. I would say as part of owning 10% of this person, you had to agree to go short 10% of somebody else in the class. That's more fun, isn't it? And you think, well, now who do I want to go short of? And again, you wouldn't pick the person with the lowest IQ, you would start thinking about the person really who turned you off for one reason or another. I mean, they had various qualities, quite apart from their academic achievement, but they had various qualities. In the end, you didn't really want to be around them, and other people didn't want to be around them. And what were the qualities that lead to that? Well, there'd be a whole bunch of things, but it's the person who's egotistical, the person who's greedy, the person who's slightly dishonest, cuts corners, all of these qualities. And you could write those down on the right-hand side of the page. If you have it, you can get rid of it. And you can get rid of it a lot easier at your age than you can at my age, because most behavior is habitual, and they say the chains of habit are too light to be felt until they're too heavy to be broken. And there's no question about it. I see people with these self-destructive behavior patterns at my age or even 10 or 20 years younger, and they really are entrapped by them. They go around and they do things that turn off other people right and left, and they don't need to be that way, but by a certain point they get so they can hardly change it. But at your age, you can have any habits, any patterns of behavior that you wish. It's simply a question of which you decide, and why not decide the ones that, I mean, if you like, Ben Graham did this, and Ben Franklin did it before him, but Ben Graham in his low teens looked around and he looked at the people he admired, and he said, I want to be admired, so why don't I just behave like them? And he found there was nothing impossible about behaving like them. And similarly, he did the same thing on the reverse side in terms of getting rid of those qualities. So I would suggest that if you write those qualities down and think about them a little while and make them habitual, you will be the one that you want to buy 10% of when you get all through. And the beauty of it is you already own 100% and you're stuck with it. So you might as well be that person as somebody else. Well, that's a short little sermon.
If you have any bad habits, this is the motivation you need to change them and build good habits instead. Second advice, do something you love, something that makes you happy.
Now, I get to work in a job that I love, but I've always worked in a job I loved. I loved it I loved it just as much when it was a big deal if I made $1,000. And I urge you to work in jobs you love. I mean, I think you're out of your mind if you keep taking jobs that you don't like because you think it'll look good on your resume. I was with a fellow at Harvard the other day who was taking me over to talk, and he was 28, and he was telling me what he'd done in life, which was terrific. And then I said, "What are you going to do next?" And he said, "Well," he said, "after I get out my MBA," he says, "I think maybe I ought to go to work for a management consulting firm because it'll look good on my resume." And I said, "Wait a second, you've been 28, you've been doing all these things. I mean, you've got a resume that's 10 times as good as anybody I've ever seen it already." I said, "If you take another job you don't like just for," I said, "isn't that a little like saving up sex for your old age? You know, I mean, there comes a time when you ought to just start doing what, you know, so I think I got the point across to him. But you ought to take a job. When you get out here, take a job you love. Don't take a job that, you know, you think is going to look good on your resume. Take a job you love. You may change it later on, but you'll jump out of bed in the morning. I mean, when I got out of Columbia, the first thing I tried to go to work for Graham immediately. I offered to go to work for him for nothing. He said I was overpriced. But I kept pestering him. I went out to Omaha and I sold securities for 3 years, and I kept writing him and giving him ideas and doing all these things. Finally, I went to work for him for a couple of years, and it was a great experience. But I always really worked in a job. I worked in a job that I loved doing. And you should really take a job that if you were independently wealthy you would take. That's the job to take, because that's the one that you're going to have great fun in. You'll learn something. You'll be excited about it, and you can't miss. You may go do something else later on, but you'll get way more out of it. And I don't care what the starting salary is or anything of the sort. I don't know how I got off on that, but there I am. So I do think that if you think you're going to be a lot happier if you've got 2x instead of x, you're probably making a mistake. I mean, you ought to find something you like that works with that, and you'll get in trouble if you think that making 10x or 20x is the answer to everything in life, because then you will do things like borrow money when you shouldn't, or maybe cut corners on things that your employer wants you to cut corners on. Or it just doesn't make any sense. You won't like it when you look back on it.
Third advice: don't borrow money for frivolities.
I urge you, in anything, we never basically borrow money. I mean, we get float through our insurance business and to do things, but I never borrowed money. I never borrowed money when I had $10,000 basically, because what difference did it make? I was having fun as I went along, and it didn't make any difference whether I had $10,000 or $1 million or $10 million, except if I had a medical emergency or something had come along like that. But I was going to do the same things when I had a lot of money as when I had very little money.
Following these 3 Warren Buffett's advice will change your life positively.